thing is that we have to go to a higher order than this. We can't use reason on somebody that's not valuing reason in the decision-making process. You would have, if you really want to have
I do value reason. It's just I'm talking about something that is not right or left.
All right, let's get started here. I was going to play another intro, but I'm running a little behind schedule, and I had a couple hiccups there on my internet, so I apologize. Anyways, welcome to the Non-Sequitur Show. Have a very interesting discussion tonight, something that goes way back when, to the days where we are discussing the human chromosome number 2 fusion site. And I have a guest on today who is a young Earth creationist, who is I'm going to let her describe what she is, because I already got it wrong. I already put it wrong in the bio. I'm going to have to fix it. So I'm going to let her describe her field of expertise. And since we don't have a biologist with us, we're going to muddle through this best we can. I have asked a few people to join. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get somebody tonight. It's kind of the way it is sometimes. But they will be watching later, and they will say they will do a review. So anyways, Katrina Cook, is that correct? Oh,
yes.
All right, and I know you through Facebook, basically.
Right.
Right, and we've had discussions, and I invited you on the show, and so your background in this is.
I really have no background. I've been a Christian, born again Christian since 1989, so it's been about almost 35 years, and actually got into nursing when I was in the Army. And I just recently earned my doctorate in nursing practice last year.
Congratulations.
So I'm pretty much an amateur at all this.
Well, that's still a huge accomplishment. Huge accomplishment.
Yeah, well.
No, I mean, I have a big look. Nurses, I have the most respect for nurses. I think I respect for doctors, don't get me wrong, but nurses, they do all the I hate to say grunt work, but they're the backbone of the medical system. I have VA, and so I know nurses are extremely important.
Yeah.
All right, so
we keep the doctors in line.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're supposed to. I also got Reds Rhetoric in here. He's not going to go on camera. The God may or may not exist. I've seen his space before. You guys do not want to see it. But anyways, Mr. Reds, welcome. Oh, you don't. Trust me. It's God was not blessed to him. Red.
That is absolutely true.
But he is super smart. He is super smart.
That's a lie. But anyway. Yeah, it's been a moment, it's been a time, it's been a place, it's been a thing. So thank you for having me on, Steve. I'm not going to be much help because this isn't really my field of expertise, but I'll do what I can.
Sounds good. By the way, I should say for the record, I put this on a couple Facebook pages, and I already got some people that have some misunderstandings of my channel. I don't know if you're familiar with called Betteridge's Law of Headlines that says if you state something as a question, it's almost always the answer is no. And so when I put this as a question, does human chromosome number 2 explain human evolution? Because of Betteridge's Law of Headlines, people just assumed I'm advocating that it's no, but I'm clearly advocating that it's yes. So I think there's a little confusion there. So yeah, I support evolution. I'm a firm advocate, 100% believer of evolutionary theory. It is the best by far explanation for biodiversification. Young Earth creationists clearly disagree. Old Earth creationists agree 90 some odd percent, 95% maybe. But anyways, on this particular topic, Katrina, as you know, there's supposedly, well, not even supposedly, I think you will agree that there is something on human chromosome number 2 that is a fusion site, correct?
Well, there is a supposed fusion site.
Oh, okay. Okay. So and again, I never want to misrepresent anybody's position. So you don't think it's a fusion?
I do not think it's a fusion, correct.
Okay. Okay, let me just, like I said, I'll just ask straight questions. Why do you not think it's a fusion? And then we'll talk about why maybe we think that it is.
I don't think it's a fusion because I believe that we are created in God's image. You know, God created all of the animals and he created man as a separate being from all of the other beasts. And he created us with 46 chromosomes, and the apes were created with 48 chromosomes. They're completely separate.
Okay, that's a religious belief, but I mean, as far as like the science, because you're a nurse, so you've had biology quite a bit, I assume. You've had genetics. You know how DNA works.
I do.
So if you look at the human chromosome number 2, I mean, we do know that translocations do happen, right? You've read on Robertsonian translocations that these things do happen in other species, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the hallmark for those, if I'm not mistaken, again, it's going back a long time here, is the telomeric repeats, correct?
Correct.
And so,
of which there are only 798 at that site.
I don't think there's that many. I think there's only like 16 pristine ones, and the rest are degraded, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Again, I'm going back some time here. I haven't really reviewed this stuff. I really haven't. But we see that there are sense and anti-sense. Matter of fact, I'm not going to show it right now, but in the thumbnail, there's a picture of the telomeric repeats, right? And it shows that they are going one direction and then switched after the fusion, correct?
Correct.
So why would it not be fusion then?
They are, no, because a telomere is a pristine site and it has 5,000 to 15,000 repeats or base pairs, or
the repeat is TTA
right, it's TTA and then right. CCC, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I understand that, but at this supposed fusion site, they're basically located at the subtelomere region.
Correct.
And it's so few that it's not necessarily considered a telomere to telomere fusion. And so I don't think it is a telomere to telomere fusion, because it's the only type of fusion of this sort that has ever happened in our history, as far as I can remember from what I read.
Well, now there's numerous instances of Robertsonian translocations. They happen quite frequently in humans,
but they have no effect. They usually cause cancer, or they cause some other problems.
Not if they're complete. Not from what I understand, and again, we're going to have biologists review this because biology is not my field either. But from what I understand, when telomeres fuse completely, there are no known really medical issues. I mean, there might be something in the germline later on, but for as far as like most people that have Robertsonian translocations, there's a whole family in was it Denmark, if I'm not mistaken, that all have a Robertsonian mutation. But as you were talking about the telomeric sequences, there's that 16 pristine, and then in the pre-telomeric sequences, you have other, and as you said, in the subtelomeric region, which are degraded, but you also have the cryptic centromere, and that's the only chromosome that has 2 centromeres, one active and one cryptic. And so why would a chromosome have a cryptic centromere unless it was the fusion of 2 other chromosomes from pan-troglodyte? I believe it's 12 and 13, or just one A and one B.
Well, you also have a centromere that is so degraded that it's not hardly a centromere, and it's also located in a genomic region where RNA transcription is taking place. It's an active gene site. It's not an inactive, necessarily an inactive centromere. there's plenty of activity at that site.
Where's the evidence that it's not that it's more than a pseudogene? Because Dr. Tompkins argued that the DDX11L2 gene was active with transcription there. When I looked at the data for the transcription,
Right, that's not a pseudogene.
No, it is a pseudogene. It's listed as a pseudogene, and it's also transcription was
well,
very,
you can
very
name
low.
it whatever you want.
But
you can name it whatever you want. They named it a pseudogene. However, there's activity, there's DNA activity, there's RNA transcriptase. It doesn't act like a. What do you mean where?
Well, in what tissues? Because the tissues that they did samples from, the highest was in the testes, and it was still very, very low. It's basically spurious transmissions or transcriptions. Dr. Tompkins argued that it's an active gene, but when I asked for the evidence, we all asked Dr. Tompkins for the evidence. Where is this transcription taking place? Where's the evidence of the transcription? He didn't provide any. And Answers in Genesis hasn't none either. And I'm still looking for that evidence. If you have a link to that, I will be happy to look at it and then show it to biologists, because to date, no creationist site has ever given the transcription levels for that particular DDX11L2 gene. It is spurious at best.
Okay, well, I have several papers here that I've gone through.
Please.
And I'll just have to
name them.
Get it to you at a later date.
Can you name one?
I got tired of reading.
I'm sorry, what? You have what?
I said I have several papers here that I've gone through. I can't remember exactly where the tissue is, but I've read that the transcription, the transcription, which reads from 5' to 3' is located at that gene site.
Yeah, it's from 5'
I'm not
to
sure
3'
what tissue they
but
extract it from.
it's also missing the promoter region too, though. There's no promoter for that. And so how is it going to have transcription if there's, again, biology is not my field, people, and I'm going back years on this. So if you call me out in the live chat, if I'm screwing this up, I will take the heat for this. Reds, if you see me screwing up. But from what I remember, there was no promoter region. So there's no transcription. It's the highest was in the testes, and I think it was like 1,000 RPKM, or I think they call it. Every site in Ensemble, I went to Ensemble. Ensemble has no evidence of any active transcription of that gene. So
well, there was an experiment done with yeast that showed that in order for a centromere, a telomere to telomere fusion, end-to-end fusion to produce viable offspring, the centromere had to be deleted. So these researchers deleted this centromere from the chromosomes before they fused it, and the yeast was able to reproduce. Well, the centromere
but other species doesn't have that. The Munchak deer has many, many different translocations. We see evidence of translocations in many different species at their cryptic centromeres that are not deleted. Like the Munchak has how many? I mean, it's like numerous different. They're like one of the most researched animal for these types of Robertsonian translocations.
Well, how many have you seen in humans?
There's a whole family, like I said, in Denmark that has one.
What do they have?
There's I don't remember the name of the family, but they all have a fusion, and I think they have 45 diploid number of 45, I believe, or yeah, I think it's 45. I'm 44. I don't remember the exact number, but they have a mutation, and they exist just fine. And
they have 46 chromosomes?
I think they have 40. I think it's 44, if I'm not mistaken. Again, maybe when they review this, somebody can remind me of it. Because let me see if I can look it up. Diploid family fusion. I thought it was in Denmark. Like I said, somebody remind me. But.
So in my research, I come across, I just scanned across it, some family that had a gene, but they didn't really go into too much detail of what the gene, of describing the gene. So they just mentioned it in passing.
Yeah, like I said,
I'm not really sure what that was.
I'm not remember the details either. I just remember there have been instances of Robertsonian translocations. I mean, that's just. I mean, I thought.
Well, I'm not talking about a Robertsonian translocation. I'm talking about a.
But that's what this is.
No, it's not. The centromere is located inside of a gene, so it's not a.
But it's not an
Robertsonian translocation. It's described as transcription that is going a transcription that's going across the gene,
but
not a Robertsonian translocation.
But you have papers on that because Dr. Tompkins had no evidence of that, and you have other evidence that there is an. So you know about the DDX11L2 gene, right? Which is in the family of DDX11 genes. Okay, the only person I've ever heard said there's any transcription of that. Any is Dr. Tompkins, but you say there's other scientists that have actually found active transcriptions across that gene.
Yes, they discussed the RNA polymerase.
Well, the RNA polymerase, it can't attach if there's no promoter region, can it?
There is a promoter region in it.
The promoter, the DDX11.
And I can't remember I have some secular papers that I got offline, from online, but I just can't remember where I saw it from because I didn't really think it was that important of a point because for you have to go back to the history of this gene fusion. For a gene to fuse, where did it fuse? So you have to have, if you have all individuals that have 48 chromosomes, and for one individual offspring to end up with 46 chromosomes from a fusion in one generation. I
think it was fixed. I think it was there was more than one step, and I think it was fixed in the after a period of time. From what I remember.
Right, they say that it was fixed after a period of time, but it had to start somewhere.
Well, yeah,
it can't be fixed unless
they lost the gene. They lost the chromosome because two chimpanzee these were common ancestry for humans and pandroglytes. The common ancestry lost that gene because there was lost that chromosome because there was a fusion of them, right?
For a fusion to happen, there had to have been a degeneration of
telomeres,
the telomere sites on two separate chromosomes in one individual, and then this one individual, who did he mate with? If he was to find someone with that same fusion on the same from the same chromosome,
or similar. I don't know. I don't remember the exact situation where the offspring eventually became 46 because again, all members of great ape Hominidae or Hominidae or whoever you want to say it. I have 48. But if you look at the actual genes on that chromosome, they are identical almost to the T to those on the related pantroglodyte chromosomes, correct?
They're identical according to staining, but they're identical according to staining. But there's been further DNA sequencing that shows that humans have far more genes than apes do.
But not on
they're not
identical. As you said, the staining, which they did, if I correct me if I'm wrong, the staining happened in about the 80s. They used fish,
right? And
the bands were lining up perfectly. I mean, it is clear evidence that human chromosome.
Right, bands line up perfectly, but bands don't count the number of genes. They don't count. They didn't sequence the genes. The genes weren't sequenced back then, so you can't say that because they banded the same, they look the same. Morphologically, that they're identical genetically.
But the bands show that there is a unique banding, which is obviously
not
going to be random chance.
According to stains.
So why would they have such matching if the bands are so alike between human chromosome 2 and the homologous homologies of the pantroglodyte chromosomes? Wouldn't that indicate that they share some kind of genetic ancestry together?
No.
Because why not? I mean, we all are genetically related. I'm even related to Reds, although I really don't want to have to admit that on air. But we're all related.
The only reason we're genetically related is because we have the same designer. You only have 4 amino acids in the DNA to choose from, or the 4 deoxyribonucleic acids. You only have 4 to choose from. Yeah. So these sequences are going to be made up of only 4 of these amino acids. So you can only arrange them in so many different ways to provide a specific function. We all have to breathe the same air. We all have to walk on the same earth. We eat the same foods. We digest the same way. So we're closer to primates in that respect, but we are not. We didn't come from the same ancestor.
It's
going
funny.
back to my explanation about who did this individual mate with, you have to have a person with 46 chromosomes mating with another person with 46 chromosomes, or you're going to get a sterile offspring, just like you see in mules and donkeys. I mean, in horses and donkeys, they produce a mule, and then the mule is sterile. The male mule is sterile. The female mule can only reproduce with a horse, and that's a rare occasion. So who did this 46 chromosome individual mate with?
Maybe somebody else that had the similar type of translocation.
How is that going to happen? I mean, it's so rare.
Well, it could have been.
I
hate to say it, but it could have been a family member.
We see in the literature that this type of fusion is very rare.
Yeah, no, it is rare. And I don't have the details on that. I will always tell my audience when I am completely not familiar with a particular area of something I'm talking about, I leave it to my audience because they're a lot smarter than me. Okay. But it's funny you mentioned that. And Reds, you might remember this. Do you remember back in the day? Because by the way, you don't mind we go off on tangents on the show, do you? Because we have fun here. Is that okay, Katrina?
Oh, what? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry. I said you don't mind if I go.
Talking to Red.
No, I said you don't mind if I go off a little tangent here because we like to entertain as well.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so way back in the day, if you guys remember, a Nephilim free. Does that name ring a bell, Reds?
No. Please.
Here's growing. So it's I can't. You can't stop me, man. Can't stop me. My show. So back in the day, we had a creationist who argued that DNA was comprised of amino acids, and this was not just a misspeak, right? We all have misspeaks. We all do that, so that's not a big deal. But this was an actual creationist who argued that DNA was comprised, which is a polymer, but he argued that the monomers were amino acids and not nucleotides. And it was so funny because I have the videos of this, and he's a well-known creationist on YouTube. But I just thought that was funny because I tried to correct him on that. I was like, because you corrected yourself, and so I mean, no big deal. But you're right. You only have the 4 nucleotides, but that sequence of them is what dictates how messenger RNA is going to be transcribed, and that's how it's going to be later through transcription going to be coded for some kind of peptide or protein or something like that. Correct? Through the central. Right. What they call the central dogma of biology, or the central dogma of biology.
Right.
But when we're talking about the similarities of humans and all other members of the great ape family, we notice we have very similar proteins. They have the same kind of functions. Even cytochrome C, I think, could still work up to 48% degraded. It still has, if you could use amino acid substitutions, it all has the same function as far as ATP production in electron transport chain. That's kind of, you can say that it's common design, but let's assume arguendo that we wanted to look at our similarities of our genetics and our chromosomes and compare that to some of the closest ancestors, bonobos, chimpanzees, orangutans, whatever. And we wanted to see if we somehow were related. How would we go about doing that, and what conclusion would we come to based upon our number of chromosomes, our number of genes, the sequence of these things in the chromosomes, the fact that we have these telomeric repeats in human chromosome number 2? What conclusion should we draw just by looking at the evidence of this, sense, antisense, or forward and backward head-to-head fusion of these telomeres where they shouldn't be, and all the facts that those other genes are there, and they are similar genes. I mean, there might be some differences, but they're very, very similar. We have like 98 to 99% genomic similarities to chimpanzees. Is that correct?
No, we don't.
What's the similarity?
Whenever they came out with this 98% number, they had not fully sequenced the human genome, and they had not fully sequenced the chimpanzee genome. And now that that DNA sequencing has advanced, we find that there's about an 80 to 90% similarity.
That's only.
However, the difference is the 14% difference is a huge number of base pairs. It's trillions of base pairs. So if you look at the differences, let's go by an Occam's razor scenario. We can't mate with them, and they don't have our same blood type.
No, we're different species, and the RH factor is going to be different, clearly, right?
Of course.
Okay.
So if you go by that simple scenario, who did this 46 chromosome individual mate with? You have
I have no idea
scenario where you can. I mean, it's that person would have to be in the same area at the same time during the
or
same.
Or it could have been a family member or cousin.
Fertility.
It runs in the family, right? If it runs in the family, it could have been obviously a family member, something in the same species. Because again, we know this translocations happen in the whole family. It has the same translocation, so it can happen. So it could have been.
So whenever I speak to evolutionists about humans coming from Adam and Eve, they always make fun of me, saying that, "Oh, you believe in incest." So you're saying
these are animals, millions and millions. This supposedly happened like 6 million years ago. There was not humans 6 million years ago. The oldest human is like 2 million years, give or take, if I remember correctly.
So when did this fusion take place?
I thought it was about 6 million years ago.
Right, and because it's 6 million years ago, according to the study that I read, it could not have been fixed and so degenerate at the same time within 6 million years.
Send me that. Yes, send me all your paperwork again. I'm going to be talking to Jackson Wheat and a few other people that I know that know biology to address that, because I want to have a fair platform. And I want to be able to get the information out to my audience, especially when I'm not qualified in the least to give that information. But real quick, go back to the genomic comparison. If you exclude non-functional genes, these pseudogenes, if you just look at the protein encoding regions, it is about 98 to 99. I don't know where you're getting your information from. Are you talking about Tompkins when he came up in 84%? No. Okay, because Tompkins.
Well,
Tompkins originally came up with 70%. That was shown to be an error. You remember that, right?
I don't know about that part.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the 70% genomic analysis?
No.
Okay. Dr. Tompkins, let me tell you the story on it then, because I was familiar with it, because I was around when it happened and I knew some of the players in it. Dr. Tompkins did a genomic comparison, and he used a BLAST program to do it. And the BLAST program he used had a bug in it. This was pointed out by a friend of the channel. His name was Ruhif, and he has a big old blog on it. And he pointed out that this program has a bug in it. And so Dr. Tompkins recognized this was an error. And so he reran his results. And when he reran his results, he got an 80% match. And the way he did that was, I'm just going to say straight up a little bit. I'm not even saying a little bit. It was a lot dishonest. What he did was he used the ungapped parameter, where he treated indels as not just one event because they happen at one time, but each nucleotide difference in the base pairs as a difference, which obviously is going to make the genomic comparison way higher than it is. So he was trying to get close to that 70. It gave him 84%. But as any person who I've ever talked to biology, and Gutsa Gibbons has amazing videos. She just broke 100,000. Huge props to her on her sub count. She has some videos on this, and she and other people have explained that that's not how you do these genomic analysis. You don't use the ungapped parameters. You do treat indels as just one mutation because it's happened at one time. And so if you account for that and you don't use the ungapped parameter, from what I understand, it's about 98 point something 5%, 99%, which again, I've never seen any evidence to the contrary. But you say there is for the protein encoding regions? Oh, by the way, I have somebody mentions this here. Autistic Shill, who's been a member of the channel for 8 months. If you want to become a member of the channel, please do. Don't let me stop you. She says, I think you're talking about this family, the NonSequitur Show. And then she gives me a link here. So let me give the name of the family. And then you go ahead and address what I said. It is a family with a Robertsonian translocation, a potential mechanism of speciation in humans. That's exactly what I was. Yes. Their Robertsonian translocation occur in approximately 1 in every 1,000 newborns. Although most Robertsonian translocation carriers are healthy and live normal lifespan, they are at increased risk of spontaneous abortions and risk of producing unbalanced gametes and therefore unbalanced offspring. This was a balance, by the way, translocation. Mm-hmm. This was not an unbalance, meaning that all the genetic information was there. And so they do recognize that this family is a carrier of them. I don't think they mentioned their name, but if I remember correctly, they were. This was a Chinese family. This was the Denmark one. But would you like to address how that you can have a whole family with Robertsonian translocation that could eventually speciate?
Could eventually speciate?
Yeah, and just in the live chat if you want to bring it up. Yeah,
I remember reading that in one of these papers that I have.
Yeah, this is the one from Denmark, but I've read this before. Yeah.
Well, I don't know enough about Robertsonian translocations, but I do know that the the site that we're specifically talking about, that the centromere is in an active site of not only transcription, but also protein coding and another.
Okay, what source for that? Because Ensemble disagrees. Ensemble says there's just spurious transcription. It's just spurious. It's so low that they can barely detect it in most tissues, which is not the sign of something you'd expect from something that's protein encoding. And the Robertsonian would just be for any kind of acrocentric, is that how you pronounce it, if I remember correctly? Whether you have a long arm and the short arm, and then you have the centromere higher, that one of the short arms combined with one of the other long arms for another chromosome. For us, it's human. It's 13, 14, 15, 21, and 22. So Robertsonian translocation is going to only happen with certain chromosomes because of the way they're shaped with the long and short arms. And by the way, we've also seen these in jelly. I think it's jellyfish, wheatgrass, donkeys, ants, wasp. I mean, when I remember looking at this, there's a whole bunch of species that I was reading about that have translocations. They're not that uncommon. But like I said, they usually are they just go by unnoticed, because unless you do a karyotype, you're not going to notice these things, I would imagine. How would you, unless they're unbalanced, but if they're a balanced translocation and you don't do a karyotype, how would you even know there's a translocation? That's a question. I mean, go.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah. How would you?
I thought you were rhetorical.
No, I'm not. I'm curious. How would you even know there's a translocation unless you do a karyotype, if it's balanced?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think you would. Yeah, I don't have. Is there any biologists in the live chat? Hey, chat. Let me know, because again, I'm gonna have them review this afterwards, and I want to get your arguments out, so when they do review this, they can answer your questions, and then I can get it to you, which I think is perfectly fair. But right now, I'm still not finding any evidence of the DDX11L2 gene is just transcribed. Again, that was only Tompkins' word for that. He just said, quote, again, going back, it was a highly expressed gene. For a highly expressed gene, I would expect there to be, in some kind of database like Ensemble, an evidence of transcription of that gene. But there isn't any. And again, people had asked him for it, and he just will not provide it. And I find that to be odd when you're arguing on a creationist page, not you.
I think it might be in the Yuxin study.
What is it?
But I didn't get through all that entire paper.
Yuxin?
Yuxin, I don't know how to pronounce.
Yeah,
Yuxin FAN. Oh, FAN. In 2002. Did they mention something about transcription?
Yuxin Chen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yuxin Fang.
Yuxin Fang. Okay.
I didn't get through all the paper though.
Yeah, that's fine. No, that's fine. Because again, as long as you can provide them to me, where I can get them to the people that can actually read the papers properly. You know, my interest is epistemology more than anything else in philosophy. I have a background in nuclear operations, but that was very, very long time ago. I did take biology, and I have an interest in biology, but I leave to the technical specificities to people way out of my depths. This is like if we're going to talk about rocket science, or we're talking about flat Earth. I mean, that's when Red shines. Right, Reds? I'm trying to include you here, Reds. You're awfully quiet.
I'm not an expert at this. If I were to attack this position, I would attack it in a different way.
Attack it another way, because none of us are experts in this particular field. So I find it interesting just to talk about it, because as lay people, these are the questions that should be asked. These are the because most of my Christian followers are old with creationists, right? Dr. Ross and Dr. Fuzz Rana from Reasons to Believe, they're both old earth creationists, so they accept Christianity, which I don't, but they accept Christianity, but they also accept evolutionary theory going back millions of years or billions of years. Now they do obviously believe in some kind of ensoulment, which I don't, but that's where we differ. But they do believe that humans have millions of years of evolutionary processes. But if you want to ask questions like why Katrina will hold to young earth belief as a Christian, we can dive into that a little bit if she doesn't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, one of the first questions that I would have is in regards to her opinion about the scientific community. Because if you're going to be speaking to individuals that actually know what they're talking about, like I said, I'm not an expert at this. I don't know what a telomere is. You asked me that, I would flunk out. It's not my field of expertise. But when it comes to other individuals that do work with this stuff almost on a daily basis, the overwhelming scientific consensus is that evolution is a thing. It has happened, and there is evidence for it. So I guess my question would be, are they being deceived in some way? Are they liars? What is going on when it comes to the scientific community as a whole?
Well, the scientific community as a whole is, for the most part, in the United States, evolution is protected by law. Creation is not given a platform in the public schools. Is like a brainwashing that if you don't believe in evolution, then you're stupid or you're anti-science. Or when the scientific revolution in the 17 and 1800s were mainly done by Christian scientists who wanted to know about God's creation. However, we find that in the 21st century, there's this worldview that evolution is a fact when you cannot empirically test something that supposedly happened millions of years ago. You can look at the evidence. Creation scientists look at the evidence, and we have a different worldview. So our conclusions are different than the evolutionists who have a worldview that, everything is naturalistic and materialistic. We have a worldview that God created all things and for his good pleasure and for us to enjoy. And he created us in his image, and he created the animals separate from us. And he did it all in 6 days.
That's all well and good and stuff, but I would like to challenge the notion that that evolution is protected in some way. I would say that no idea in the scientific literature is protected. I think the only reason that evolution is on its high horse, let's say, is because it has stood up to scrutiny. And this is not just scrutiny from other scientists, like I said, that know what they're talking about, but we're talking about objections and challenges from, I would assume, creationists. I don't think there's anything stopping creationists from posting or submitting a paper to a respected scientific journal calling out the major flaws that happen to exist within evolution. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. But yet, whenever
peers are stopping us from doing that, peers are saying that it's like a clique. When you have cliques in high school, you're not going to let the nerd into the jock clique. This is what is going on.
Scientists like nerds. That's just the whole thing.
That's what I'm saying. So in the scientific community, you have a bunch of evolutionists that will not allow creationists to submit their papers because there's an evolutionary clique.
Well, here's the problem with that.
It's a fact.
It's not, and here's why. First of all, for people that know and are out there, because Reds doesn't know, telomere is just basically end of a chromosome that has these specific repeats to prevent these types of translocations. So when they get degraded, then you have a problem. They start to mutate, or they start to have these issues. So they're just a sequence of nucleotides. That's how they are. A very specific sequence of nucleotides. That's a telomere. And then as the cell will split, these telomeres get shorter. It's called the Hayflick limit. I think it's like 40 or 50 times, and then the cell dies out. It's senescence. So this is basically preordained cell death, from which she would probably believe would be a deity that programmed it that way, if you go over intelligent design. But the problem with what you're saying is this. Yes, evolution is protected as far as the educational system, right? Because we have to have a standard of education to teach students. We teach them math, reading, writing, arithmetic. We also teach them things like, the theory of gravity, which is legit, germ theory, which is legit. All these scientific theories, what we know, have been confirmed models. The theory of evolution is a confirmed model that explains biodiversification. It is a well-substantiated body of evidence that supports facts, that makes accurate predictions, that explains observations. There is no equal to it. The creationists have no model that explains about diversification.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. There are several creation models.
Baraminology, correct?
What?
It's called what they have is called baraminology. And while I
don't know what baraminology is, but I know that there are several creationist models.
Well, that is the model that creationists use. It's based on baramins.
Not all creationists use the same model.
The younger creationists. That's generally what they use. Go ahead.
The thing about what you're saying is that, okay, let me phrase it like this. In order to submit a scientific paper, you have to include within that paper your rationale for making this argument, your evidence for making this argument.
Right, I published, so I know how it works.
All right, perfect. Well, then you also know that in order to rebut a paper, you have to have actual reasons for that idea to be rebutted. So if you have these arguments, it doesn't matter what clique you are in, facts are facts. And if you have the facts to back up your idea, then your idea is going to withstand any scrutiny that is thrown at it. But yet when we see creationists attempt to submit papers that go against the grain, let's say, they seem to be easily, rebutted by not just one scientist or two scientists or three scientists, but a lot of scientists who independently come to the same exact conclusion, usually following the same line of evidence that they found independently of each other.
Because you have the same worldview.
No, because it's the same science.
You're looking at the evidence with the same worldview. So
yeah, but the thing is that evidence is...
We look at evidence of the Grand Canyon, and y'all see geologic columns, and we see flood layering. So that we're interpreting the evidence differently, and because we don't interpret the evidence the same way, then we're kept out of that, of even publishing the paper. So when I was in high school, I was in a class called Comparative Political Systems, where we learned about democracy and communism. We had them side by side, and we learned about both types of government. Why can't we do that in the scientific community? Why can't people learn about both sides of the argument? We are barred from even attempting to present our argument. So it's a biased community.
I wouldn't say that you're barred from presenting it, but going back to
from submitting it, I'm telling you.
But flat earthers can make the same argument. Let's compare flat Earth to the geocentric model, or geocentric versus heliocentric. The fact that these models have been disproved by science, and whether you agree or not, younger creation has been disproved by science. You don't have to agree, but in science, it has. I mean, if you,
it hasn't.
Like I said, you don't have to agree. But the point is that there are objective facts in the matter.
Yeah,
I'll give you a perfect example, then go ahead, Reds. But I want to point out that we have this happen. Dr. Humphreys, who I asked you about earlier, he made a math error in one of his papers, which was the Creationist. And again, I don't think you have to have published to have a paper. My paper's not published, but my paper has 3,500 views. It's still in the top 3%. It's still talked about. It's been vetted by dozens of PhDs. Okay, so I got my information out there to show my argument and let people evaluate that argument, right? And overwhelmingly, like every single expert has said this argument's fine. There's no problems with the logic, and that I respect. But Dr. Humphreys put his out similarly. He didn't publish. He put it in the Journal of Creation, and mentioned me and some other people that were familiar with what was going on, Dr. Henke and Dr. Lachelt, and he had a math error. And Dr. Lachelt pointed out this math error to him, which he didn't want to acknowledge. Dr. Lachelt then published in a peer-reviewed journal, which was a Christian journal, but it still was a peer-reviewed journal, on radiometrics. And he noted this math error, forcing Dr. Humphreys to finally admit, not necessarily publicly, but he did admit that his math was wrong. And we all noted this math error. Why? Because this was objective. It was a simple math error dealing with logarithms to get his data to more fit to what he would expect for a young Earth. This is how science works. When you look at mathematics, if you know a little about math, you can show that the math is wrong. And this is exactly what happened. Humphreys put out his argument. Dr. Lachelt, who's an expert in domain modeling for solid-state physics, and I would say an expert on helium diffusion rates, he saw this math error quite easily, and he published on it. And that's all creation has to do. If they see an error, they can get published. But what they can't do is point out what they believe in their worldview, because that's not doing science. They need objective, measurable, empirical evidence in science to say this is the case. Let me show you the data and let people review that. And every single solitary time I've ever read anything on creation.com or anything like that, it's, like you said, based upon their worldview. It's not based upon the science. They fit the science to try to match their worldview rather than looking objectively.
That's the exact same thing evolutionists do, though, because
but that's science. Evolution is
cannot
science.
Empirically measure anything that happened thousands of years in the past or millions of years in the past. You cannot empirically test that, so you have to look at the evidence from a forensic point of view.
But science observes today. Science doesn't look at anything historically. Science observes what's happening today and says, this is our phenomenon. How do we explain it? We observe humans have 46 chromosomes. All other great apes have 48. We observe similarities in proteomics, morphology, anatomy, comparative anatomy, and all these different things. Everything that we'd expect if we're related, that's what we see across every discipline of science, whether it be radiometric dating, geography, cosmology. In every single solitary domain of science, there's a consilience of billions of years of history. Every
you
single
see
one
what you want to see, because the human to ape ancestry was already put out there in the 1800s, and then when it was discovered that humans have 46 chromosomes and the great apes had 48 chromosomes, then they're like, oh, we have to somehow figure out how we are still related when they have 48 and we have 46.
True. Yeah, so you're absolutely right, and that is true.
Right.
They
so
didn't know.
You conveniently found some evidence that
it wasn't convenient. It wasn't like
it
they
was
just made
convenient.
it up. Here's the thing. You're absolutely right that they couldn't explain it. Science couldn't explain it at the time. And then they had, like I said, the fish data in the 1980s and saw the banding and go, wait a minute here. There's clearly a relationship here. And then they actually did the actual paper that came out that showed this was exactly what would explain the fact we have a different diploid number. This explains our observation. It explains it perfectly. The data fits the observation. There is no other explanation for it that fits it. God is not an explanation for anything. What we're looking for is scientific evidence. So if you take God out of the equation, I'm not trying to dismiss your worldview, but if you just say it from a scientific point of view, because you agree science holds to methodological naturalism and non-overlapping magisterium. You can't say God done didn't, because that's non-explanatory. If we want to look at the science, what would be the reason why we have a different diploid number in the science? Not just God, but in the science.
In the science is because the humans and apes have a different ancestry.
You mean different kinds?
Yeah, we have a different kind of ancestry. We have the apes have a common ancestor, and humans have a common ancestor.
All right, what is in the ape kind, if not us? We match. The similarities between us. I mean,
your assumption is that we're apes.
Yes.
Apes cannot compose. Apes cannot paint. Apes cannot come up with mathematical equations.
But those are cognitive
functions. They can't
functions.
do the same things that we do.
But we have a specialty for that. Just like the specialty for bees is they can make honey. They have a specialty for that.
Also, Coco would like a word with you after this stream is done. Quick
Coco
thing.
can't speak in 7 different languages.
Is Coco still alive? I thought Coco
I have zero idea, but if Coco might not be able to speak, but Coco could do sign language, and Coco could say a lot of things. And I am a big fan of the Coco. But anyway, you
can't
mentioned
do what a 5-year-old can do.
Yes,
I think it was about 3 to 5, 3-year-old that Coco was the
5-year-old human. She can't do what a 5-year-old human can do.
Go ahead.
That's just a basic level of intelligence. They come from a different ancestry. We come from separate ancestry.
I don't think that's science. I mean, how's that science that they have different abilities? I can't fly. I'm not a bird kind.
I didn't want to bring
up Coco. What is scientific about just saying that we have a common ancestry when you have no way to go back and test that historically?
But
all you're doing is looking at banding. So what could have happened is that if we did have some common ancestor, then we became humans, and then the chromosome fused in the human line. So that still doesn't prove a common ancestor. If there's a fusion, it could have happened in the human line.
I didn't want to bring up Coco to compare them to our modern day particle physicists. My apologies. But anyway, let me get back to this idea of interpretation, because the interpretation that creationists are usually putting forward when they're interpreting the evidence, it really does become an assertion and not an interpretation. And I'm going to give you a very extreme example by going to my forte, which is flat Earth debunking. I have independently measured the altitude, size, and speed of the International Space Station. I have captured its silhouette as it went across the face of the moon. I have independently mapped out its orbit. I know its orbital elements, and I can make a program in my computer that can predict exactly where it's going to be down to the millisecond. I can do all of that. All this information, I'm interpreting it to show that it is an actual craft that's actually doing NASA stuff and is indeed in space. Now, a flat earther is going to look at that evidence, and how is he going to interpret it? Well, every time I show a flat earther this piece of evidence, they say, oh, well, it could be a hologram. It could be, NASA real-time hacking your camera and making you think that you're seeing things when in reality it's not actually there. Now, that they're going to assert to me that that's their interpretation of the evidence. Now, my whole point of bringing all of this up is whether we like to accept it or not, some interpretations are more reasonable than other interpretations. And we have to ask ourselves the question, at what point does an interpretation become unreasonable? And when it comes to the idea of creationism, I would argue that it has dived into the realm of being unreasonable, and that's why we're not teaching it in schools, because it is unreasonable to go down that line of thinking, being that there's nothing that would support that line of thinking in the first place, which would bring it back into the reasonable section. So it's not really a case of protection. I don't think that exists. I think it's just a case of, we looked at what you had to say, we've concluded that it's not to the standard that we would be comfortable with, therefore we're not going to teach it.
What is unreasonable is thinking that naturalistic, materialistic explanations can explain everything that occurs in the universe.
Well, that's
naturalistic
philosophy,
explanations cannot explain everything.
Well, that's
but
philosophy, though.
Going back to your example of refuting flat earthers, we see that the earth is round in real time. This is happening now. We see that the earth is round. You cannot see a common ancestor from 6 million years ago.
Yeah, but I can also see
that.
Yeah, but I can also see something else. I can see like tectonic activities in the drift, and I can measure their rates. And I also know that if they were to go much, much faster, like let's say the connection between Africa and South America, if they were to come together within a 6,000-year time frame, the amount of friction that would create would literally make the entire planet into molten rock.
That actually has been demonstrated mathematically.
That has been demonstrated.
Yes.
But and another thing that I see today.
What has it been demonstrated at?
Another thing that I see today.
That California has earthquakes, and there are various earthquakes all over the world.
There have been people who actually did that.
There's not that much heat created.
Yeah, but let me finish my point here, and then I'll address that. So we have identical fossils from the same species on two separate continents, land-based fossils, land-based animals that are separated by a massive ocean. And the only thing that could possibly explain that, again, given the fact that these two continents fit together like jigsaw puzzles, we can see that at one point they were connected. They were one landmass, which means the animals were free to travel between the two of them. And then when they died, became fossilized and split apart, that explains why we're seeing the same exact animal fossilized on two separate continents. But then we also say, okay, well, if they were to spread apart within a 6,000-year time frame, the amount of friction that would create would literally turn the entire planet molten. So you then asked, what is the evidence of this? Well, there's two big ones. The first one is computer models. Now, I know people are going to be kind of hesitant to accept that, but we know the properties of rock. We know a lot of facts about the interior of our planet. There's many different ways that we can figure this out. And if you were to model this out, it makes the entire planet uninhabitable because of the amount of heat that it would generate.
It's called the everyone dies scenario.
You're only taking in the heat. You're only taking in the heat of the Earth. You're not taking in the fact that there are ice caps on both in both.
There's
a lot of water.
No. In such a situation, the heat would be so great there wouldn't be ice caps.
Yeah. He's talking about the friction of plate tectonics. There's a couple of different aspects of the heat problem that young Earth creationists have to account for, which is, by the way, whether you accept it or not, is unresolved in young Earth creationism. They have no explanation for this stuff. They even admit this in the rate study, that certain things they cannot explain yet. They believe that they will eventually. But one
the heat problem is a hypothetical problem, though.
Well, no, it's not even.
No, it's an actual problem, which is why it's not
an actual problem. It's a hypothetical problem based on calculations. You haven't seen that in real time.
Well, yeah, but so this is an area this is an area I do know a little about, nuclear decay rates and things of that nature. I'm not an expert in it, but I did have the basics. But there was a doctor, he works at the University of Florida, Dr. Joseph Merritt, and he actually did a calculation on this from radiometric decay. The three main primary sources for radiometric heat in the Earth are uranium, thorium, and potassium. And these decay at a very specific known rate. And he calculated that for the flood, because they say the flood did accelerated decay, something that Dr. Humphreys talks about quite a bit. And when I asked Dr. Humphreys, what is your evidence of accelerated decay? And I'm not even joking. He literally had told me it could be no other way. It has to be accelerated decay because God. That was his scientific explanation. He took it out of the realm of science. He literally said God had to do it this way, and that God suspended the laws of physics, which no longer puts into science. I'm not joking. I have the correspondence with him. But one sec. But here's the thing. He calculated that the amount of heat from these radioactive nucleotides that have to be accounted for would raise temperature to 65,000 degrees Celsius per kilometer. That was enough heat to liquefy the crust of the Earth. It's an everyone dies scenario. And this is a well-known problem. The rate study admitted we have no explanation, when they say we, younger creationists, had no explanation for it to resolve it. And they just had to say, well, God made it happen at a certain point. That no longer takes it out of science. Young creationists want to be taken seriously in science. They want to publish papers, as you said, but when they say things like, well, we cannot scientifically show this or explain this away, we have to posit God for it. Do you agree? That shouldn't be in science because that is no longer explanatory.
But you're assuming something that happened in the past. You're trying to scientifically measure a past event.
No, this is
making
not a scientific
hypothetical. You're making it into a hypothetical situation.
But
you don't know that.
It's not hypothetical. We know decay rates. We know decay rates don't change. That's not hypothetical.
How do you know decay rates don't change? How do you know that the decay rate is
I'll give you this one.
How do you know that there's not the same amount of daughter isotopes?
Let me clarify. We assume.
Right, you assume. That's all I'm saying.
Wait, let me finish. We assume under what's called Hume's uniformity of nature, which is a philosophical thing, that decay rates don't change. So when you have uranium-235, uranium-238, thorium-232, and potassium-40, which are the main causes of uranium nucleotide heat, we assume those decay rates are constant. There's no evidence in science
that they vary. But how do you measure those decay rates?
We look at a sample, and after one half, when we say a half-life, that means half of the atoms are going to be left. So if you have
millions of years, who measured that? You can't directly measure that.
We don't
You're making all those assumptions.
Well, first of all, we don't need to for isochron dating. We can extrapolate. If we have this much amount of the sample and we wait a certain amount of time.
But you don't know that the daughter isotope was not there to begin with.
Well, hang on, I'll address that. If we have a certain amount of material, and we wait to see how long it takes to get one half of it left, we can determine the half-life. In isochron dating, we don't need to know the parent-to-daughter amounts, initial conditions. All we need to know is the ratio of parent to daughter. Carbon dating is very different. Carbon dating, you do have to make certain assumptions or know what the primary or initial conditions are because it's based upon the PERT formula, right? It has just for simple exponential decay.
But you're assuming that when a rock is formed, that there are no daughter isotopes in the formation, right?
Isochron dating does not require initial conditions. It is a mathematically what's called geochronology geochronometric formulas that all it has to know is that there's a specific daughter to parent decay ratio. That's all it needs to know. And then look how much of an item is particularly left. And then it plots it on what's called a line. That's why it's called an isochron line. And we've done this using potassium, argon dating, lead dating, uranium dating. All these different sources have this similar type of evidence that some of these things are just millions, if not billions of years old. There's a consilience there. Not one of them, not a single solitary radiometric dating points to young Earth creationism. And yes, we have to assume decay rates don't change, but if creationists want to posit they do, they need to explain it scientifically. And so far, there's no evidence of accelerated decay. And just saying God accelerated and changed the laws of physics. And by the way, you may not have read it, but Humphreys one time even argued that pion decay rates changed in order to justify this. I mean,
I don't know about pion decay rates, but
that's
how do you
you're trying to come up with? Yeah, it's weird.
How do you explain the Mount St. Helens rock formations that were dated at, I don't know, there was a
because those were Snelling and Austin, who were two younger creationist PhDs that misled people, because when you have argon dating, you have two major things that have problems with it if you do it for a lava flow. And again, I'm going back here. Wasn't going to go into this particular topic, so it's been a while. But you have what's called inclusions, and you have argon escape. And so when you're looking at when the rock last solidified, then you're looking at how much inclusion of argon was there from other sources. It's not endogenous. And all you're looking at is the last time that the magma was solidified. And so we're going to have wildly different results if we try to radiocarbon date magma flows. This is a well-known issue with radiometric dating. This is why they don't date lava flows, because it doesn't give you accurate results. And also, I think it was Austin. Somebody can correct me, but I think it was Austin who argued that these strata that produced are rock layers. It's not. These are polyclastic flows that made these layers very quickly. They're not rock layers, though. And he tried to tell people, oh, look how fast the Grand Canyon can form this fast. It's not the same type of rock. It's not even related.
But it's still, so sediment is from water flow, right?
Well, but you can have sedimentation from pyroclastic flow very quickly, but that's not how the Grand Canyon formed. The Grand Canyon formed from what's called uplift.
How do you know? You can't. How do you know?
Science tells us this. That's what
I'm
saying.
Does science doesn't speak. Scientists tell you the interpretation of what they see.
Because there's no other models that explain it. What our observations are. There's no other models that explain the tectonic activity that Reds was describing for the Grand Canyon other than uplift. If somebody can show how this could be without uplift, then I'd be willing to read this, obviously.
Explain how uplift happens.
Uplift is when you have something like this, and it causes, basically, you have a river, right, goes in the middle, and then it goes up, and it widens and becomes much higher because of pressures.
The river becomes much higher?
Yeah, the river, because all that stuff was underwater at one time, right? This is why we see crustaceans and mollusks and shells on top of various mountains, because those mountains were literally seabed at one time, and then you had plate tectonics, like the Himalayas formed like this. So again, geology is my weakest area. So my audience and anybody who reviews this, sandbox this, because I do not take my word for any of this. Okay? Well,
the creation model is that everything happened during the flood.
But don't you have
these same plate tectonics, the volcanoes?
But you have a subduction zone, right, where one plate goes under the other, and the other one rises up, and that produced the Himalayas. This is why we see those types of crustaceans at the very top of the mountain. But those crustaceans are from species that died out millions of years ago. They're not modern species. Yeah.
Aren't there oysters and clams up there?
Not to bring it back to my second thing I wanted to talk about.
My coffee.
Okay.
Yeah, you kind of go on a roll, and then
have you been to the
back.
show before, Reds? After all these years, you know how it is.
Yes. I should be used to it, but you know what? I'm not. So, okay, let's go ahead and try this. So this is the second reason I was going to tell you. So the first one I brought up was models in computers, supercomputers, whatever, that would literally show that the planet would turn into a molten mess if we were to condense the separation time to only 6,000 years. So for the second reason, I'm going to talk about this. I want to cook some cookies in the oven. All right. And I'm going to set the temperature of that to what do cookies go at? 250, 300 degrees, something like that. So what do you believe would happen if I increase the temperature by a factor of 54,538? What would happen to those cookies?
They disintegrate.
Charcoal?
Yeah, not only would they disintegrate, I would have a portable star in my oven.
You end up like my ex-girlfriend's cooking?
Yeah, pretty much. Yes, you would be like, I just discovered fusion in my oven, and it's awful. But so yeah, that's what would happen. Now, we see what happens in the Pacific with the Ring of Fire, and that's at the current rate that tectonic plates move. We see what happens with earthquakes, and that's at the current rate that the tectonic plates move. In order for the movement of the tectonic plates to be spread apart to the distance they are today in a period of 6,000 years, I just did some fast math on this, we would have to increase that rate by 54,538.88. Now, if we're dealing with earthquakes and the Ring of Fire at their current rate, what if we were to make it worse by a factor of 54,538? We would be pumping so much energy into the system that it would literally melt the planet. And so when I look at this, I say, okay, so what is the most reasonable explanation? And if the explanation is, well, friction isn't going to do friction things because God done made it that way, I'm sorry, that's not a reasonable explanation that I would be comfortable introducing into our public school system. See what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean, but that's not what the model is describing. It happened in about 378 days, and there were different conditions during the flood.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're saying that at a particular moment in time, the friction wasn't frictioning, and therefore no problem. But
it's not saying that the friction wasn't frictioning. I'm saying that there were different conditions, and the friction occurred at a rapid state. Everything was underwater. All this was occurring underwater.
But look how much water was produced between the water that was produced. Hang on, the
heat is being dissipated.
Not that quickly.
The heat is being dissipated out as well. It's not going to be contained under on the earth.
Katrina, they literally have done calculations of this, and you're welcome to do them.
I understand they've done the calculations, but they're still hypothetical calculations.
No, this is math. Are you familiar
just
with
like in this new Google AI, it can only give you what humans put into it.
Well, yeah, you just discovered that this morning, though, right?
Yeah.
Hey, real quick. I literally, before we went on air, I was telling her about AI technology, like ChatGPT. She's never heard it before, and I think she's going to, all of a sudden, she's going to be like, "Oh my God, I'm going to be like the rest of the night," because it's pretty cool. I mean, being AI is pretty cool, and it does amazing imagery stuff too. But real quick, are you familiar with enthalpy? You're a nurse, and you probably had to learn about enthalpy and entropy, right?
Right.
At some point in time. Okay. So they calculated the amount of enthalpy, which is the amount of total energy in a system. And like Red said, given the young Earth creationist model, this is from their worldview. This is from their model of the flood, including how much water is produced, how much plate tectonics, how much radioactive decay. All of this is an everyone dies scenario. They are well aware of this. They have tried for decades to overcome this particular problem because this is the problem that they created. This is their worldview. They have not resolved this problem, Katrina. I'm telling you, I know a lot of the players here. Not one of them has resolved it. Dr. Humphrey's latest work was in 2015, and that even the other creationists have said no, his explanation doesn't work. Just like when Jason Lyles, who is a PhD younger creationist in cosmogony and cosmology, he has the asynchronous anisotropic synchrony light convention, which is basically just philosophy. It's not even science. And it doesn't give any evidence for a young Earth. It's just, I don't want to say it's sophistry, but it's irrelevant. It's just a convention. Just like if I want to make the Earth the center of the solar system, I can through what's called Galilean transformations. I can say the Earth is the center of the solar system in my model if I make it mathematically so. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You could do that. It just takes.
Don't bring physics involved into this.
Well, it does work. The Caylanian, if you do the Caylanian transformations, it'll work, but it makes it super complicated. You have all the epicycles, and why would you need to do that when you have a very parsimonious model of the sun? Then you have the planets, Mercury and Venus and Earth and Mars and Jupiter. They go roundy elliptical orbits.
In terms of timing, yes.
Yeah.
In terms of timing, but in order for just let me get on my high horse for a second here. In order for any geocentric model to make any sense, Earth would have to be many different masses at the exact same time, and it kind of isn't. So there you go.
There's other problems with it too, sure. With the baryonic center.
But let me get back to the argument that I'm actually making here. The solution to this would be to dump a ton, well, more than a ton, many tons of water over this absolute fireball that we're now calling Earth in this scenario here. Well, in that case, even if there was enough water, instead of being, burnt to a crisp, you'd just be boiled. Either way, you still don't have an environment that is conducive to life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dr. Ross calls this problem, who is an old Earth creationist. He is a Christian astrophysicist who's been on many times. He got Dr. Another Ross, named, I think it's Morris Ross, but he got another young creationist to admit that this heat problem is intractable. It is not a problem that they expect to really solve. It's just that they have to keep the younger creationists believing. And so they until they even come up with even a hypothetical model that would work, that's why they're not allowed in the science, because their models do not work. It violates no laws of physics. Do you remember? I'm a little bit older than you, but we may remember back when there was a guy named Gentry, Dr. Gentry, that had these radiometric halos that he was arguing were indications of a very rapidly cooled Earth. Not so much young Earth creationist.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I mean, and this was something he even said. He wasn't arguing. He was a young Earth creationist, but he even admitted that this was not evidence for a young Earth, only that it cooled within several weeks, which could be incidental evidence of a young Earth. I'll give him that. But I've done whole presentations on that particular subject. And if you look at his evidence, we didn't know how to explain it away from science at one time. But then when science looked into it, they found explanation for it through what's called xenon transport. Xenon 222, these things through water and micro crevices in the rock were making these formations of these daughter halos from the parent ones. We explained it. Gentry's work was for naught. I mean, it was never correct. We showed it wasn't correct. And what Gentry did, he did the same thing Humphreys did. He posited what was called singularities, which were one-time events where God intervened, which takes it out of science. So you keep on saying they want creationism to have equal say in science in the classroom. But every single time that there's a creationist that posits these things, they always have to go, God done did it. And I hate that little term, but that's what it is. Because every time.
You keep saying that, there's no explanation, or either there's no explanation or there has to be a scientific explanation. There's no explanation for the origin of life. There's no explanation for the origin of the universe.
Not yet,
there actually
science is working
okay,
on that.
so there is an explanation, but how do you get to it from a naturalistic, materialistic explanation?
Well, abiogenesis.
There's no such thing as abiogenesis. Except for in Genesis, when God created man from dust of the earth, and he created the birds from the water and the beasts from the earth.
Yeah, but I can tell you how
that was the only incident of abiogenesis. You don't have a single example of abiogenesis anywhere.
Yeah, but let me tell you how we solve this problem. We solve this problem within our school systems by acknowledging what we do not know. Because what we're getting really close to here is the God of the gaps argument.
It's not a God of the gaps argument. It's an argument from what we do know. We do know that according to the laws of biochemistry, there is no way that you can get life from non-life. Because
if you look at yourself through a scanning electron microscope, you would find yourself completely made of non-life.
Yeah, I mean, we're comprised of, if you look at mereological nihilism, our primitives are just atoms. We're just a collection of atoms that happen to be in a very specific configuration. But we have life. And even your version of abiogenesis from God is life from non-life. God is not biological, so God is not constitutive of what we
Right,
consider
God
to be.
created life from
But hang on,
non-life, but it cannot be done from
But
naturalistic
but that's
processes.
not science. If we take dirt, no matter how much dirt we have, we're not going to be able to say life comes from it. We know that at one time non-life existed in the universe. We know life exists now. Therefore, we need to have a scientific explanation of why life came from non-life, because that's what science does. It has naturalistic explanations, which is done for thousands of years. We try to have naturalistic explanations. God as an explanation is not what science does, and this is why it's not allowed in the classroom. Does that make sense? I mean, if you were to
No, it doesn't make sense because they're both hypotheses of historical events. They both should be presented fairly.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I would argue that they had their chance to be presented, but they lost that chance by putting in a lot of, well, and Steve hates this term too, and I hate it too, but I'm going to say it anyway. God done did it. God done did it is
you're saying time done did it. You're using time as a evolutionary process. You're using time. I wouldn't say. Let's go back 4.5 billion years. Oh, it couldn't have happened in 4.5 billion years. Okay, let's say 15 billion years now. That's how it's going to be 200 years from now. They're going to be saying the universe is 15 billion years old. Well, because you can't get these things from naturalistic processes, so you use time of the gaps.
There's this here that we're going in. There's a window of opportunity of where the correct answer is going to be. What we know for a fact is what is outside of that window. 6,000 years is way outside of that window because I'm looking around me and I find myself not burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, there's something called an error bar, right? And so when you look at these types of things, the Young Earth Creationist error bar is so many standard deviations away. Matter of fact, I had a guest on the other day, Grayson. I didn't invite him to the show here, but he hasn't gone back to me. But if you look at the Big Bang cosmology, the Big Bang cosmology error bars, going back to like t = 0, is so small at a certain point from the cosmic microwave background radiation that there's no other possible explanation but the Big Bang cosmology, which, by the way, was from George Lemaitre, who was a Belgian priest, and he was a Christian, and he got flack for it initially, but he showed that the universe is billions of years old. Now, you're right that these things get more refined. We've never had a situation where we say the Earth, is 4 billion years old, and all of a sudden it's going to be like, 6,000. Never has happened because it's not in the error bar that allows for that. It just doesn't happen.
How do you know that it's old?
Through multiple different lines of science. I mean, like I said, every single branch of science, you
have no other universe to compare this universe to. You're just going by what it looks like. That doesn't mean that it's actually millions of years old.
But you're talking about science, right? You want science in the classroom.
Well, look at me and you. Let's compare you and me. I'm 55 years old. You would look at me and
you're older than me.
I'm 55 years old. You can't look at the universe and determine that it's
I was wrong.
Millions of years old without another universe to compare it to.
All right, she's 1 year older than me. Young Earth Creationism confirmed. There you go. All right.
I'm just using that as an example. I'm just saying you cannot. So if the universe is created in a manner that it has to support, or the Earth has to support 8 billion years. 8 billion people in some future that we are in now. It has to be created in a way that.
But Katrina, my point is that every single branch, there's no branch of science that says, "Oh, here's billions of years, here's 6,000." Name one branch of science that has any evidence of Earth being only 6,000-7,000 years. Any branch, actual scientific evidence, not creationist science, but actual science. There isn't
none because because
that's exactly right.
Right, there are none because back in the 1800s, the 1700s, when everybody was getting on this bandwagon of rationalism and criticism and criticizing the Bible, that's where all this started. Now that we have more better evidence, it's coming back to where.
But how do you explain that when we have Christian scientists? I mean, Newton was Christian. Lemaitre, Oppenheimer, I think, was too. Wasn't Bohr? I remember many of the original creators of quantum mechanics, had theistic beliefs. So I mean, we don't disallow Christians in science. I mean, some of the friends of the channel, like Dr. Cy Gart, is a biochemist. He's a Christian. So is Dr. Fuzz Rana. So is Dr. Ross. These are all Christians, but they all accept.
I know they're all Christians. I disagree with them because they're not young Earth Christians, but
But why? But why? But here's the thing. Let me ask you, and I'll just be blunt. As a Christian, what makes you so holding on to young creationism? I had a debate with Wayne Filmer.
Well, because my authority is
hang on. I did a debate with Wayne Filmer, who was a Christian. He was a young creationist, and it was on Macroevolution. Weeks later, he left young creationism. He realized it was untenable, and he's gone into science teaching and other things. He's still a Christian, although he has questions. He is questioning that, but I mean, he's still a Christian. But what is it about science when you have all these different scientists that are Christian, and you only have a handful, maybe a dozen of younger creationist scientists who many people have proven puts out misinformation? They have demonstrated that they literally have put out misinformation. I've done this, and other people have done this many, many times over. Some of them deliberately, and some of them I don't think so much. I think Dr. Jonathan Safadi doesn't want to put out deliberately information. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I consider him a friend, and I will respect him enough to think that he really believes what he believes. But I have seen other younger creationists deliberately put out misinformation or not correct it. Like Humphreys never publicly corrected his math error. Why is that?
I can't speak for somebody else, but I can speak for myself. The Word of God is my authority, my final authority.
Their argument is the Word of God. They're biblically literate.
Okay, well, my final authority is the Word of God. And he was the only one that was there at creation. There's nobody else there. So we're making all these assumptions about what happened in the past. You cannot empirically test a historical event. I don't care how much you say that this is science. If you're going into empirical science, this is not it.
How is it not
empirical
science?
It's not empirical science because you cannot test something that has happened.
That's not what science
billions
does.
Of years ago.
But that's not what science does. Science never
right.
is supposed to do that.
Science looks at the evidence and it gives an interpretation.
I'm gonna head out here.
You're having two different interpretations.
I'm gonna head out.
But I gotta head out too. It's like
I got another show to do tonight. Hopefully with something on
yeah,
after dark,
exactly.
But
so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say my piece here and then I'll head out. See, okay. My thing is. Well, there's three things I want to address. First is, well, where did life come from? Where did the universe come from? My answer to you is simple. I don't know. And I'm not going to pretend to know. Until we have a good scientific answer for those questions, I'm just going to say, I don't know. And you know what? That's fine. And if that's what we tell our kids, that's also fine, because that would be the truthful thing to tell them. There are certain things about our world.
It's not the truthful thing to me, because I do know. I do know that God created everything.
I'm going to address that in the second point.
Okay. All right.
So it's going to be the case that, if we tell them that we don't know something, that's fine, because we should also be teaching them that it's okay to not know something. So if you don't know something, that's not to reflect badly on you. In fact, if you admit that, that means you have intellectual honesty, and that deserves to be respected. Number two, when it comes to other creationists, and, I guess you can include yourself in this group, that want to assert that they do know for a fact that something is a thing that indeed happened and there's no way around it, well, then in that case, I would expect them to have the evidence to back it up. So if you would like to present something that's like a paper that you're okay with having peer reviewed, then please submit it, and I'll be more than happy to read it and see what you have to say. And if your paper aligns quite well with Occam's razor, then I'll have no problem adopting that into my view of reality. And finally, number three, the last thing I'm going to say is, when it comes to the history of it, you're right. The laws of physics could have been totally different in the past. God could have suspended the laws of physics to make things appear a certain way when in reality it's not that way. In my opinion, though, there would be no reason for God to do that. What better way for God to demonstrate his immense power than by making a universe that is so massive and so old and so powerful, where 99.9% of it is trying to actively kill you? There would be, in my opinion, no better way than to demonstrate that we are insignificant compared to the power of God. And so I don't see it as a dog on the guy if we were to say that, the universe is billions of years old, and that the laws of physics are the way they are and that most of it's trying to kill us. I don't think that's a dog on him whatsoever. And so the idea that we can't have that view and still be a Christian or a God believer in some way, shape, or form is a bit crazy to me. I just wanted to.
I mean, he just mentioned a few that of Christians that are old Earth creationists, old Earth theists, or whatever they want to call themselves. They're. I mean, I'm totally fine with them as long as they believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They're my brothers and sisters in Christ.
Well, that's his point, that you don't have to be married to this young Earth creationist viewpoint because.
But I believe young Earth creationists.
Well, that's fine, but you don't have to be married to it because science has disproved it. But I know you would disagree.
Science hasn't disproved it.
But
yeah. But that was my last point. I am going to say goodnight, and I will talk to you all later.
We're going to wrap this up.
Thanks for coming.
But Katrina, I do want to thank you coming on. It's been difficult. I'm not joking to find young Earth creationists willing to go on anybody's shows nowadays. I don't know what it is. It used to be they had what's called the Debate Me Bros, but they all go to their little echo chambers. They don't want to be questioned. They don't want to have conversation. And when I find somebody who's willing to, whether I agree with them or not, that's what this show's about. And so I'm thrilled that you were able to come on and have this. I do want to, obviously we're friends on Facebook. And so I do want to, when you do get the paperwork, send me what you have. I want to read it. We'll definitely have a part two, and we'll go from there. But I very much humbled to have you on, and we disagree.
Thank you for having me.
But it was fun. I do have another show coming up, hopefully at 9 tonight. I don't know. I'm waiting for my co-host. If not, I have to postpone it again. It's Non-Sequitur Show After Dark on Lucid Dreaming. But if we can't make it tonight, we'll do something else. But Katrina, thank you. I'm going to end the phone call here.
Okay.
I'll fix your information. Send me what you want as your bio, and I'll put it in the video description. So I want because I said she was a nurse practitioner. She chided me for that.
Oh no, I'm not a nurse.
Yeah, I'll fix it. Okay, but thank you. I'm gonna end the call and say goodbye to my
audience.
Can you
send me a copy of the video when you're done?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Good night.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Yep. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for watching the Non-Sequitur Show. This was actually entertaining. Again, it really is difficult to find creationists that are willing to come on. Hopefully, she'll maybe find some friends for us or stuff like that. I know that most of the more name recognizable YouTube creationists don't go on other panels. They always seem to stay in their echo chambers, which is something we all note. But I do know that there's going to be a few people that are going to review this video, at least parts of it, and hopefully be able to answer Katrina's questions as far as the Robertsonian translocation. And I look forward to that because I don't remember the specificities of how the translocation was fixed into the population. I just don't remember that far back. I've seen things, and that's the best I can do. So I'm going to leave it to the experts on that and people that know what they're talking about. But thanks for watching, guys. Make sure that you like, subscribe to the video. And please share it all over the place. Share these videos and become a channel member if you want. Become a Patreon. I still have Patreon. I still have channel members, and people that are channel members and Patreons, they can ask me anything they want. I get back to them within 24 hours, almost without fail. And if you want to do, shows and you want to come on as a guest or like that, let me know. I will fit people in when I can. But with that, I'm going to say goodnight and hopefully see you later on tonight on After Dark. But if not, I'll postpone it again. I just haven't gotten back. My co-host hasn't got back from me that particular show. So with that, I will bid you good night. Thank you for watching. Like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment. Comments are great. Good night.